Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I'm very excited to bring you a new special report. In this one, I call it Lessons Learned from Mining Hall of Fame member Rob McEwen. And what I'm going to do is, I've had the great pleasure to spend several hours with Rob McEwen and learned a great deal from him that I think is very helpful for investors in the gold mining stocks, copper, and the other metals that I follow closely. And I'm going to talk about his company, McEwen Mining, and some other companies that he's invested in. Rob has made his fortune from the mining business in kind of two ways. One was he built Gold Corp from a tiny little junior mining company, had about a $50 million market value. They found the bonanza zone of their mine in Red Lake, Ontario. Stock went up to multi-billions of dollars in value, and that was one avenue of success for Rob. And then he was also very successful as a investor in mining stocks. And so I think that there's lessons to be learned from both that can be very helpful for investors in the sector. I'm very fortunate to call him one of my mentors. He's a very good friend of the show. And as I said, I had the pleasure of spending hours with him talking about the markets and his company and how he goes about investing. So I wanted to do this special show. And so let's get on with it. First of all, McHugh, Goldcorp was one of these rags to riches stories in the Canadian gold mining business. As I said, at one time they were trading at about a $50 million market value, and they were a struggling gold miner producing about 50,000 ounces a year, not making very much money off of it. And then Rob went to a course at MIT, I believe was the university he went to, and he learned about crowdsourcing information, and he came up with the idea of doing what they called the Gold Corp Challenge. And in the Gold Corp Challenge, Gold Corp put all of their data, all their geological data, onto the internet for in a competition where a bunch of people came together to try to win the contest. And what came of that is a new idea of what was going on at their mine in Red Lake, Ontario, and where to focus the drilling to find the guts of the system. Up until that point, they had been basically mining the upper part of what is called an orogenic gold system. What an orogenic gold system is that you have these very old rocks, and there is structures or cracks in the earth that allow the fluids from 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 meters below the surface to make their way up using those cracks in the earth as the path of least resistance. And then when you get closer to the surface, you can get secondary faulting, and the fluids that carry the gold makes their way up into that secondary faulting. So that's the basics of an orogenic gold system. And oftentimes, when you're at the very top of the system, there can be gold mineralization and high grade gold mineralization. But the continuity of that, it's kind of sporadic. It's not like you get a lot in one part of the system, and it's kind of spread out, and it makes for challenging mining. Another company that, or another project that had this same phenomenon was the Fosterville orogenic gold mine in Australia. And they also there they mined the top, let's say from surface down to about 300 meters. And they also had high grade gold, and it was sporadic, and it was a also a struggling mine. So at Gold when they did this Gold challenge, the modelers, the people that were doing this contest, came up with the concept that they had to keep following this system deeper. And as you get closer to the heat engine, where that uh, those fluids with the gold in them originated, as you get closer to it, the continuity, and you can also get what are called dilation zones. So sometimes when the cracks in the earth, they can open up like this, and then the fluids make their way in and they sort of pool up in there, and that can make for spectacular mining. So Goldcorp used this information and then focused their drilling deeper. And as they were following it deeper, they found that the visible gold in the system started to go from a fine grain visible gold down to coarse visible gold, and then they got into the bonanza, and it was just spectacular visible gold. I still remember going to the PDAC conference years ago, and they would have their display booth there, and some of the specimens of rock, it looked like it was like half gold and half quartz. It was just spectacular stuff. So Goldcorp got down to about 1,000 meters below the surface, and they tagged that bonanza zone in this orogenic gold system. And it kept on going for another 1,000, 2,000 meters below that. So when they got down there and started mining that, it increased their production by 10 times, and they were producing gold at the lowest cost of any miner anywhere in the world. And because of the super high grade, the margins were spectacular, and they were really a free cash flow machine. And so that made them one of the best performing gold mining stocks in the world. And so that's sort of a synopsis, if you will, of the rags to riches story of Goldcorp. And that is one of the reasons that Rob McEwen is in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, because of this phenomenal success that Goldcorp had with their Red Lake mine. Rob is also an interesting person because he's also does a lot of charitable work, and his philanthropic work has enabled him to win or be received the Order of Canada, which is the highest honor for anybody for Canadians. And so he's been a very big innovator in the mining business. Until Goldcorp did that Goldcorp challenge, no mining company had ever done anything like this, crowdsourcing their information. Usually that was just inside the companies that would go out and make discoveries and find new mines and all that sort of stuff. But it really was a groundbreaking thing in the mining business. It's truly innovative. And Goldcorp was a fantastic success story. I love the rags to riches stories in the mining business. And so Goldcorp always has a special spot in my mind because of that rags to riches story, the Goldcorp challenge, how tremendously high grade the Red Lake mine was. And it's kind of one of the reasons that I'm such a fan of high grade systems. And as I mentioned earlier, Fosterville was a similar story. It had gone, it had mined for about 20 years in the upper part of the system, and then they got down to the bonanza portion of that orogenic gold system, and the rest was history. It was actually a company maker for Kirkland Lake Gold that I think they ended up getting bought out for $14 billion or something like that. And it was primarily due to that Fosterville mine. And so, these are the things that become some of the reasons why I love high grade, because if you find a high grade mine, they can be just tremendously profitable. Uh, and another thing that this brings up in my mind is that, when how you find a super high grade gold system. And I've said before on a show that understanding where you are in the geological system has an important aspect of how close you are to the prize. Sometimes you can drill really close to the prize and you get what people call a technical success. A little bit deeper drilling and or a long strike, and you can find the sweet spot. And when that happens, it's absolutely magical. And which brings up another topic, which is the word magical. I was fortunate to be in the mining business during the last great bull market, which was from 2001 to 2011. And I recently heard Rob McEwen call that a very magical time, and it truly was. There was companies that just did phenomenal runs for and made shareholders fortunes. And I think we're at that time again in the mining business, and gold is done tremendously well in 2024. It went from the bottom left of the chart to the top right, and along the way, it made a series of record highs. I think it was 42 record highs in 2024. And already in 2025, we've seen the start of another bottom left to the top right with a series of record highs along the way. I think in January and early February, there's already been a handful of record highs. And but what I'm seeing is now that gold is what's happening to drive gold up to such a to current level near $2,900 an ounce is that there is a draining of the above ground physical gold in the bullion banks in London and in America. Initially, people thought that this was because of the tariff uh, that Trump was putting on, and that may have kind of got it started. But when the people learned that the Bank of England and the London Metal Exchange was having troubles delivering the gold that's supposed to be there, it started to create a run that has been affected from London to New York, where the paper traders are asking for physical delivery of the physical gold that backs up those paper trades. And this has made January the best January effect that I've ever seen in the gold price. And so what my thesis is now is that as people, investors worldwide, are learning how tight the supply is of physical gold above ground, they're driving up the price of gold, and I think they're going to drive it to a series of new record highs in 2025. But along the way, I think what you're going to start to see is that the gold miners, the gold mine developers, the gold explorers with important discoveries are going to see better valuations for the gold that's in the ground. And when you look at it, whether you look at it at the metrics of what the gold miners' valuations are relative to what they're producing, or you look at the valuations that the developers and the explorers are getting for what's in the ground, the valuations are actually at record lows right now. And so what that tells you in a general sense is that above ground gold is in a very bullish scenario. And next, I think that in the ground gold is going to be in a very powerful bull market. And so, you know, these are some of the reasons that I'm very bullish on the gold stocks, the silver stocks, and the copper stocks, is because those metals are not being, they're being sort of given away for pennies on the dollar. Even some of the great gold miners, like my top picks, Alamos Gold and Agnico Eagle, they are free cash flow machines. They're producing gold for the world average cost of gold mining an ounce of gold is about, let's say, 1600, 1650. Both Alamos Gold and Agnico, they produce gold for well below that average cost of production. And and they're making so much money that now, if you look at the valuations of companies in any sector, uh, technology, healthcare, all the Wall Street stocks, the gold miners are some of the best in breed gold miners are making more in they're being valued like a value play right now, but the earnings growth is rapid. So, you know, you got the earnings growth like like a tech stock, the growth rate, but you have the valuation more like a value stock that you invest in to be have solid earnings that might not be spectacular, but they're consistent and they're reliable. And so you got this phenomenon that the earnings growth is like this, but the valuations are like value plays. And so this creates a situation where I don't think of course, if you want exposure to a gold and you want to have less risk but leverage, one way is to look at your Alamos Gold and your Agnico Eagles. I think that they're a much better investment than going into a gold stock mutual fund or an ETF, or even gold itself. For example, in 2024, gold went up about 27%, 28, somewhere around 27, 28%. Meanwhile, Agnico Eagle and Alamos went up about 100%. So three times the performance. And yet they're still at bargain valuations relative to how they're growing their gold based on the last few quarters, not even looking forward into the future. And meanwhile, you got stocks out there on Wall Street that are priced for perfection, beyond perfection. And you don't know what you call that. So the gold stocks are the best in breed, are a very low risk way to get outperformance to the price of gold. But then there's another group that are what we call high cost producers. So average cost is about 1,650. The best in breeds are, they're producing it for a couple $100 less than that. Then you have some that are producing it for a couple $100 more. And you take, let's say, at $2,000 an ounce and you're producing it for 1,850 or 1,820, for argument's sake, you're making about 10% on the gold you produce. Now, gold at $2,900, when it's costing you that much, all of a sudden you're making $1,000 an ounce. And so these higher cost producers start to make money hand over fist. And they're out, and the leverage to the balance sheet is quite incredible. And so they get a lot of attention in the early days of a bull market for gold stocks. And then the industry needs a lot more um, uh, new mine developments in gold, silver, and copper. And there's just not enough of those around relative to the demands for those metals. And so the industry needs more new mine developers. There's not a lot of great projects out there. And because there's not enough great projects in the development, it's because there's not a lot of great projects in the exploration of finding important discoveries, because those are the ones that end up being developed. And so, because what you can tell by the lack of, or the cupboard being bare, if you will, in the developers, is that the explorers have not been having that success with important discoveries for a long time, which is why there's not enough developers. So no matter where you look along the spectrum of the supply chain of gold, and I would say the same for silver and copper, you have uh, it's broken, and yet the demand is going up. And so this in itself is very bullish for the price of gold, silver, copper. And so this brings me back to Rob McEwen and his company, McEwen Mining. And so McEwen Mining it's got a nice slide here. You see Los Azules. That is their copper development project. Look at that beautiful sample of native copper there in the drill core. And so McEwen has sort of a few different buckets, if you will. One of them is they have one of the best undeveloped copper mines in development projects in the world. It ranks in the top 10. And of those top 10, a couple of them are in sort of permitting purgatory where they've been in it for a couple decades, and they may be a couple decades more before they get the permits, although a couple of those are in America, and with President Trump, maybe he'll make that permitting quicker. But then you look at the top 10, and uh, probably over half of them are owned by major mining companies. Uh, and so McEwen Mining, which has a valuation of about $600 million Canadian, is one of the only juniors that has a top 10 undeveloped copper mine. Now, what makes it also exciting is that, oh, I forgot to share my screen. I'm sitting here looking at the website of McEwen Mining, thinking that you can see what I'm talking about. Here we go. I'll bring it up now. There you go. And I'm going to go back a couple slides because I wanted you to see that. So this is their Fox complex in Ontario. This is their gold mine. Okay, so I was starting out by talking about their copper project. So not only is it in the top 10 of undeveloped copper mines in the world, it's also in the bottom percentile of undeveloped copper mines in the world. So it's a very exciting project. And I've heard Rob compare this to what it would look like if it was a gold mine. So he uses what's called gold equivalent. So if you convert the copper into the equivalent amount of gold, this would make for a tier one gold mine producing about 700,000 ounces of gold a year at an average cost of about $550 an ounce. So it would be the best gold mine in known to mankind, and it would be in production for 3 decades. Um, and how that compares to Gold Corp is Gold Corp was producing about a 500,000 ounces a year, and I think they did that for about 10 or 12 years. So this is bigger, it's lower cost, and about 3 times the mine life. So if you were looking at their Los Azules mine as a copper project, it would be, or as a gold project, it would be one of the best gold mines in the world. And what the industry needs more of is the industry needs more copper mines in a big way to meet the demand that is coming from various different sources, the development of power grids in developing countries, the need to upgrade power grids to function for electric vehicles, technology, cloud computing, the internet, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles. Robert Friedland often says that, if we are going to need in the next 2 decades an equivalent of all the copper that's ever been produced in the history of mankind. So all the history of mankind producing copper needs to be produced in the next 20 years, and that's just not going to happen. There's not the mines to do that in the pipeline, even if every copper development project and every exploration project came into production. So, the argument to be bullish on copper is very strong. The argument to be bullish on McEwen Mining's copper asset, Los Azules, which is owned by a private company called McEwen Copper, which McEwen Mining owns about 45% of that. The other shareholders include Stellantis, which is one of the world's largest top four car makers in the world. Uh, that was their investment was the first time a car maker invested into a copper development project in history. Also, another important shareholder is Newton Ventures. Newton Ventures is a venture of Rio Tinto, one of the world's largest mining companies. And Newton they're looking at alternative ways to mine copper in a more environmentally friendly way. Why is this not scrolling through? I want to see some of oh, there we go. I could do it myself. Let's go. So there's Los Azules. Again, I mentioned earlier about native copper in the drill core. That's some beautiful looking stuff. So that is one of their assets. Now, another of their assets, we'll go back to this slide, is their Fox complex. So, as I said earlier, McEwen Mining has a few different buckets, and another of their big buckets is that they're a gold mining company. Earlier, I mentioned how leveraged high-cost producers are when gold is going up. And the Fox complex, the mining they have actually in Nevada, in Ontario, and in Argentina, uh, has a couple hundred, $200, $300 above the average cost of production. But now that gold is at $2,900 an ounce, that has a pretty impressive effect on their bottom line from the gold mining operations. So they've got three mining hubs, one in Ontario, Nevada, as well as in Argentina. And this move in the price of gold is very beneficial to their bottom line. Now, another part of a gold miner, or any miner for that matter, is they have to replace their old mines with new mines. Mining is a depleting resource situation. And so as you mine, you have to replace that. And so one way the key way you do that is through drilling. And the key way you show how you've done at that is through resource evaluation. And so recently they had a resource out that don't quote me on the numbers, but the inferred resource is at about, or the indicated resource is about at 1.5 million, and their inferred resources is at about a 500,000. So about a couple million ounces in the inferred and indicated category, which is about a 30% increase since they last did a resource estimate. And so they've got a couple million ounce project that's in the pipeline that will be their a future potential source of gold production down the road a few years. And and then also they're doing a significant amount of drilling right now, and that will help them to again how you replace your old mines with new mines is through drilling, and it's also how you expand on your resources and make new discoveries. And so they're kind of doing all those things with their gold mining operation, and they're not getting a lot of attention for that. And part of that is because of how remarkable the copper project is. And so when you look at all these various different factors, McEwen Mining has a very bright future ahead of it as both a copper miner and a gold miner. But right now, they're only really being looked at for their copper. But I think the gold operations are very exciting because they've got this combination of resource, uh, production increasing, cost coming down, new mines being developed. Like, for example, their Froome and their Black Fox mines are being transitioned into their Stock mine, and Stock has a much better metrics on it than the Froome mine does. So this is going to help them to increase their production and bring down their costs. And so whether you right now, I believe that McEwen Mining is only really being looked at for their copper. Meanwhile, they have a very vibrant story on their gold mining side of things, and so that's sort of the McEwen Mining story. Now, earlier I said that Rob McEwen has also made a lot of money investing personally into other companies, gold mining stocks primarily. In fact, his company Gold Corp did the same thing and invested in other companies. And Rob mentioned to me that at one time they made $80 million from the investing that they did inside of Gold Corp, and they needed that money at a certain point in time. So that was a very strategically smart thing to do for Gold Corp. And it just goes to show you again, Rob's talent at picking companies for his personal investment, as well as how well he did when he was doing the same with Gold Corp, investing in other companies. And so the next company I'm going to talk about is Goliath Resources. And Goliath is interesting because Rob McEwen is an investor in Goliath. He's done three personal private placements into Goliath. I think his first one was at about 60 cents. His second one was at around 70 cents. His third one was at about $1.25. So his average is somewhere around 80 or 85 cents. And the stock closed just the other day at $2.40. So he's done very well on it. And in fact, he had his McEwen Mining also just recently did a $10 million strategic investment where they gave Goliath Resources $10 million worth of McEwen Mining stock, and Goliath got 10 million, gives $10 million worth of Goliath stock to McEwen Mining. And I think this is a win-win situation for both companies because it can create a positive loop, if you will, that, if McEwen Mining does well, Goliath does well. If Goliath does well, McEwen Mining does well. From Goliath's perspective, now they've got a very strong balance sheet. They've got cash to the tune of about $7 million Canadian. They've got this $10 million worth of stock in McEwen Mining, and they got 89 drill holes still to announce. They had their best hole ever recently, which had 132.9 grams per ton of gold over 10 meters, which puts it in the top percentile of high grade hits in the industry over the last 10 years. Post that announcement was when McEwen Mining did this strategic investment into Goliath. I really love this map here, this little video, and why it is so interesting is I originally started following it a few years ago, and what I noticed right away was a set of structures. This one coming down here, and these two coming down here. And these are important conduits, if you will, of how the gold mineralization makes its way up towards the surface. All right. And so I'm going to keep this going now. And so since then, they've drilled all over this mountain. There is an actual outcrop of rock that starts way down here, goes all the way up and all the way down the other side of the mountain. And so here is, okay. So, oh my gosh. Okay. So this little slide, and these are a series of stacked veins in the Sherbet discovery. Why this is important is this is a lookalike to one of North America's great gold mines, which is the Pogo mine in Alaska. It also has a series of stacked veins, and you can see all these pierce points from the drilling. And what we know now is that there is about 8 to 9. You see, they go all the way from the top of the mountain over, and then on one horizon, it goes from one side to the other side. And so I believe that this is starting to look a lot like the Pogo mine, and it has widespread high-grade gold mineralization in a series of stacked veins, which is exactly how you describe the Pogo mine. And so that's one having the sort of having Rob McEwen, who is very talented at finding, investing in exploration projects well before a crowd shows up. He's done that many times. One of the great ones was Great Bear. Great Bear was one of the big takeovers over the last 5 years in the mining business. He invested in it when it was trading for like a dollar, I think $1.20 or something like that. And ultimately, it went up to $27 a share. So not only did he invest in it, but McEwen Mining did as well. So they did very well on that investment. And it's one in a list of companies that Rob McEwen has done this on in the past. And Goliath looks to be on the path to being another of these type of investments for Rob McEwen and McEwen Mining. And so having that endorsement of both Rob McEwen investing and McEwen Mining, plus you've got other really talented people that are invested in this company. Eric Sprott's in the deal very early. Crescat Capital, they also invested really early. You've got there's a fund out of Singapore that's invested and investing more in the company. Larry Childress is also not a household name in the mining business, but has done very well as an investor in the mining, primarily exploration companies. He's invested. So they got a great project and a lot of at Sherbet, and they've got a lot of really smart people that are invested in the company. I'm also an investor, by the way, just so you know my bias. And I have warrants that are in the money that I'm going to increase my position in the company. Um, I wanted to show you this slide because this is very interesting. This is called massive sulfides. And about 30, you can see it here. You can see it coming up through the core quite beautifully. And about 35 kilometers north of their of Goliath's Sherbet discovery, which is high-grade gold, widespread over in a series of stacked veins. They made this in 2023 drill or season, sorry. They did some, they had an outcrop of rock that they call Treasure Island. So they went and they cut channel cuts into the rock, it gets you down 6 inches or something like that. And they had that assayed, and it came back with very high grades, like an ounce per ton of gold, 5 to 10% copper, and it was found in this massive sulfides. And if you look at this massive sulfides beside the channel cuts, it looks identical. So they haven't released any of the assay results from this Treasure Island drilling where this core comes from, but I'm really excited to see that because I think they could be onto a second important discovery, which would be a VMS, a volcanogenic massive sulfide, uh, that's high grades of copper and gold. And what really brought and all their projects are in the Golden Triangle of British Columbia. And what made the Golden Triangle famous was the Eskay Creek mine, which was a VMS that had super high grades of gold and silver in it. And so, whenever you find a new volcanogenic massive sulfide system in the Golden Triangle, it has a way of catching a lot of investors' attention. And so I'm really looking forward and keeping my fingers crossed that Goliath has a second important discovery on their hands. So there you go. So, okay, another company that Rob McEwen has invested in and is their largest shareholder, I think he owns around 15% of the company, is called Borealis Mining. Now, Borealis Mining has a very exciting story in Nevada. You can see some of that's their processing plant. And they acquired this project and from a company called Waterton. And this is a well-known mine, the Borealis mine. It's right near the Aurora mine. And so the Aurora mine and Borealis are well known in Nevada. And Borealis Mining was able to get this project from Waterton at a time when the gold price was much lower and the gold stocks were actually going through a bear market. And so their timing was just perfect to get this the Borealis mine from Waterton. Now, Waterton has a reputation that they are trying to divest all of their gold, their mining assets, and return that money to their shareholders. So they have a reputation for selling stock hand over fist once they get that stock after they've sold the project. And so when Borealis Mining was still private, they presented the company to Rob McEwen, and Rob decided that he wanted to take all of Waterton's stock off of them. So they would have no stock, and Rob McEwen would be the largest shareholder of Borealis Mining. And so then they went public about 6, 8 months ago, and they're working to, you see that? That's a big stockpile that they're going to take the stockpile and put it on their leach pads and put it through this ADR plant, fully permitted, all the infrastructure. They have the business model to turn their little junior mining company into a pretty significant gold mining company in the near term. Like I'm talking over the next year to year and a half, 2 years. They are producing gold because there is still some gold in the leach pads that had never been extracted. Plus, they got a stockpile that they can produce from. And then they're out drilling right now looking for other deposits to also bring into production. So the Borealis mine itself has a near-term production and wide open exploration potential. But recently they made an offer to take over another company called Gold Bull. And they have a project not very far from this Borealis facility. It's I think about a 500,000 ounces of gold. It's not a big resource, but it has a very high profitability on it if they, in their PEA, they analyzed for having the material sent to an outside ADR plant. Well, Borealis Mining saw that. They saw that, they could get something like 20, 30,000 ounces of gold production at a reasonable price. I think they paid less than $10 million worth of stock to get that project and then use their ADR plant to process the gold. So when Borealis, prior to going public, was making plans, they had a dual way of growth. One was through the Borealis mine itself by bringing it back into production, doing exploration because the exploration potential is wide open, and then having that as a long-term mining operation. But their second plan was to go out and look at projects that are too small for bigger mining companies, but could be very beneficial to a junior mining's bottom line. And so they've executed on that recently. Well, they're in the process of executing on that because they are in the process of taking over the other company. I think it'll all be done within the next two months or so. And so that's another really good story for their long-term mining operations. Now, I always point this out because their board and management is kind of really incredible. You got Kelly Malcolm, who cut his teeth at one of Canada's great gold mines called Detour Lake. And then he was the vice president of exploration for a company in Quebec that has found a multi-million ounce gold mine of the future. And then he left that company to be the CEO at Borealis Mining because he wants to build his own company and have sort of his fate in his own hands. And so Kelly Malcolm, very talented exploration guy. And then you've got Tony McCooch. Earlier, when I was talking about orogenic gold systems, I mentioned Kirkland Lake and the tremendous success they had at the Fosterville mine in Australia that got them taken over. So Tony, he built the company from a small junior mining company to a major takeout. And so Tony's the chairman of the company. Bob Buchan, he's the founder of Kinross, which is one of the major gold mining companies in the business now. And he's also a significant investor in Borealis Mining. He's our director. Greg Gibson, another really talented guy. He's on the board of director. He was the led Trelawney, and from an early explorer to being taken out by IM Gold for 608 million. Richard Patricio, interesting guy. He's a director of NextGen, which has the world's best uranium development company. And so he's been a very successful guy as well. Christina McCarthy, she actually used to work for Rob McEwen, and she had success with her own company, building it from a tiny valuation company to a takeover for $91 million by i-80 Gold. Uh, Andreas Steckenborn, really interesting guy. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him in the past, and he also cut his teeth at. This is how Kelly Malcolm and him are know each other, is because he cut his teeth at Detour as well as a engineer, and then he went on and also was involved with one of Canada's new mining mines, gold mines, which is Cote Lake. So they've got a really talented engineer to look after the mining operations. Ian Campbell, he is also a friend of Kelly and Andreas. They all cut their teeth at Detour Lake, which is one of Canada's greatest gold mines. And his expertise is in resource development. Uh, he had the position of senior resource geologist at the Detour Lake mine. So that's sort of the Borealis mining story. They're a sponsor of my reports. I'm a shareholder of the company, and so those are my biases on Borealis. But really, great group of assets, great board of directors, impressive shareholders, and I think they have a bright future ahead of them. Alrighty. Now, Power Nickel, Rob McEwen, again, here's another example of him getting in early before the crowd really shows up and taking a position. And he's able to recognize quality before many others recognize it. And he did that with Power Nickel. I think his initial investment was at about 70 cents. He recently did another one at $1.25. and so he's positioned himself in power nickel early. I think Friday the just passed. I think it closed. I think it traded up to about $1.70. So they're getting a lot of attention, and it's no wonder. You can just look at the headlines. Power nickel delivers 10.6% copper equivalent over 5.35 meters. Within three, they also had 19 meters with 3.6% copper. Just really high grade stuff. Um, and you can actually just go through and see. So here they gave you some how they were expanding their targets. Here's their January 21st. So that was, let's see, February the 5th. So the assays before that were on February 21st or January 21st, 6.2% copper equivalent over 10.25 meters, within 4.29% copper over 20 meters, and that they had started their winter drill pro campaign 2025. So this actually came from their 2024 winter, the early winter, if you will. These results are from that, and they still have some more pending. And then they'll start seeing the drilling that started in January for their 2025. Appointment of Joe Campbell, really talented geologist. That's their new VP exploration. Here's another one, December 18th. 29.5 meters of polymetallic zone. You see, that's the interesting thing about this. It's not just copper. It's also got precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and other base metals. So it's being talked about as sort of a one of the great mines of the world is in Norilsk in Russia, and they think they may have a version. They don't need to have the whole Norilsk in Canada, but it looks like they've got another of these very high grade polymetallic deposits that are, in this case, very high grade copper, but it's got those other precious metals in it as well, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and other base metals. So when you calculate it all, look at that, 29.5 meters from 2.3% to up to 11% copper equivalent. Very rich rocks. They're showing you some core pictures here. Um, uh, Here's another stepped out, an additional 150 meters along strike west from their lion zone. Uh, Here again, 19.6 meters at 3.82% copper. Uh, Power Nickel announces biggest intersection yet. This was October 28th. 39.6 meters of 4.19% copper. Uh, so there you can see they had some very good gold, silver, copper, platinum, palladium, nickel, and it makes up for very high grades. It just keeps going on and on. I'm not going to keep reading but that's part of the reason why they were able to attract Rob McEwen as an important investor, Robert Friedland as an important investor, Gina Reinhardt as an important investor. These are very wealthy mining executives that have made their fortunes in mining, and they're taking positions into this junior miner who's made a polymetallic discovery with high grade copper in it. And yeah, it's a pretty incredible project. And I think they've got, these sort of things, when you get that consistency of high grade, it's predictable, it's consistent, there's continuity to it. It's just great stuff. It's called their Lion Zone, and I just think that they have a tremendous project here. that just keeps coming out with better and better result. Just gets better and better the more they drill it, and I love seeing those kind of things when they do more drilling and it gets bigger and bigger. That's the trend that you see in mines, and it's in Quebec, which is one of the best mining jurisdictions anywhere in the world. So there you go. That is an investment that Rob McEwen has made into Power Nickel. As I said, Robert Friedland has as well, and Gina Reinhardt, and a whole slew of very wealthy investors have invested into Power Nickel. And I'm not a shareholder, just an innocent bystander so far, but I do plan to take a position in this company because I think they've got a world-class discovery on their hands. Okay, now the final company is a really small company called Inventus that Rob McEwen and McEwen Mining are investors in. And what they are is they're looking, well, they have not looking, they have a conglomerate gold discovery in Sudbury, Ontario. Now, conglomerate gold is not what we hear a lot in North America about, but it's one of the most important sources of gold anywhere in the world that came from the Witwatersrand project in South Africa. At one time, I think they were producing over 50% of all the gold in the gold mining space from that Witwatersrand conglomerate project. And so Inventus has a conglomerate discovery in Sudbury, Ontario. I'm going to pull, this is what the conglomerate looks like. So it's not actually in these big boulders or big rocks here, if you will. It's in the matrix, which is in between those bigger boulders. Uh, One of the things they're working on that I find quite interesting is they're looking at ore sorting, where they would take out these boulders and then they would be, let's say that makes up 30% of a package of rock. So you take a ton or 20,000 tons of these and you get rid of all those boulders. That that does is it concentrates the gold. Instead of having a ton worth of a bunch of these boulders, you're now just having that taken away. So it upgrades your concentrate. And so they're currently doing, I think it's about 80 drill holes on a grid pattern. Let me just open up this presentation because I can show you with pictures here what it's all about. Okay, so there is the conglomerate that comes right to surface. They took a 1,000 ton bulk sample and it had 4.2 grams per ton of gold, which is quite exceptional because you're literally it's coming right out of the ground and it's in a bed, if you will, like a swimming pool or something at the bottom of it. And there is where you have the conglomerate. And so they're doing a series of these holes to get an average grade for the entire conglomerate. But it's open to get even bigger than what they've known. Look at some of this gold, how that's this image here. Just beautiful looking free gold in that conglomerate. Um, but there was oh, here, this map shows you where they're doing their grid drilling with about 80 holes, I think it is. It's underway. Those results are pending, so pay attention. We'll be paying a lot of attention to Inventus as they have more results. But this is just sort of scratching the surface, if you will, because there's a lot of room. This is an important slide here. Uh, As you can see, this is very fine grained gold. And there was a very big promotion and excitement over a conglomerate discovery that was made in Australia about 3 or 4 years ago. But what made it different than Witwatersrand is that it had these nuggets of gold that were sort of sporadically distributed throughout the conglomerate. And so sporadic distribution is not that good because you can process a bunch of material. You got no gold, and you got some gold, and you got no gold, and you got some gold. And they tried to mine it, and it didn't work because it was different than Witwatersrand. What made Witwatersrand so exceptional is the distribution of this fine gold was pretty homogeneous throughout the conglomerate. And so that's why this picture is important, is because you have this fine grained gold that is well distributed throughout the conglomerate. So this is a very, I mean, nobody's really paying too much attention to it. I think their valuation is like $8 million Canadian or something like that. But here's another important slide. This purple stuff is sort of where their advanced exploration is happening right now. But you can see that this mustard colored here, it actually extends quite a long ways. And there's a potential that, this could just be like a starter and you just keep going and going and going like they did at Witwatersrand. I think it's been in production for over 100 years. And so here, this gives you an idea of McEwen Mining owns 6%, and Rob McEwen personally owns 20%. And so here again, you got a company that really not many people are paying attention to. Rob McEwen's an early investor, as is McEwen Mining. And I think he's recognized some of these key things that I see, which is this nice distribution of gold, fine grained gold that is well distributed throughout the entire conglomerate unit. Lots of drilling happening to assess that distribution of the gold. They got a lot bigger target to keep going after, and some beautiful gold on it as well. You get some of these thicker pieces, and this is almost like all these little fine grained pieces came together and sort of glued together into one bigger. It's not a nugget really. It's sort of a accumulation of fine grained gold, but it's a beautiful sample. So that's the Inventus story. Here's again their horizon, and it just keeps on going and going and going. Um, so doing a lot of drilling. And this is another and the final example of Rob McEwen recognizing a project before the crowd comes. And I do believe that the crowd is going to come into Inventus. I'm not a shareholder yet, but I'm going to be. So there you go, folks. I started out by saying lessons learned from member of the Canadian gold mining or in the mining Hall of Fame in Rob McEwen. And I've been looking at watching his career and following Rob and watching his interviews. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him and spending a significant amount of time talking to him over the phone. And I've learned a tremendous amount from Rob, and I think my audience that's listened to my interviews with Rob has as well. Rob is a tireless promoter and advocate for gold, silver, copper, the mining sector, and he has done tremendously well building Gold Corp uh, and making part of his wealth through investing. I think he's got another Gold Corp success on his hand with his copper project in Argentina. And, you know, investors are the ones that watch this show. And so um, I I I follow certain people like Rob McEwen closely because you sort of follow in the footsteps of greatness, and that's where you can become great yourself sometimes. And for investors in the mining sector that are interested in gold, silver, and copper, I think Rob has great lessons to teach you as an investor by following his footsteps, and also as a mind builder. I think that following some of these legends in the mining business, Eric Sprott, Rob McEwen, Robert Friedland, Frank Giustra, there's quite a list, Peter Monk. If you study these people, you can learn a lot about how to be a successful investor in the mining space. And I think that's what we're all after. I wanted to share this video with you. So, as always, my shows are for information purposes only. Speak with your financial advisors before making any investment decisions. Do that homework, not just on follow some of these great investors in the sector. They'll teach you a lot just by reading and watching their interviews and watching the companies that they built in the past or trying to build now. I think this will all make you a better investor, and I wish the best for you. All on that note, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.